Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump's former vice president has declined CPAC invitation. Trump is expected to address the conference February 28th. This is Fox News. Former Vice President, President Trump's former vice president, has declined an invitation to attend this year's Conservative Political Action Conference. Fox has learned the former vice president was invited to speak at the annual event, but turned it down. Former President Donald Trump will be in attendance, however, as he is scheduled to make his first public appearance since leaving office. Now, members of the former vice president's team has said that he harbors some bitterness towards the president. Okay, so here's my take on this. For the love of God, keep the comments very, very civil and reasonable pertaining to the former vice president, because here's my take on everything that's happened the past 4 or 5 months. You already knew, and I'm not even going to say his name, not even in the title, but you already knew that in the beginning of President Trump's tenure, like 2017, almost immediately after he was sworn in, January 20th, 2017, when Madonna and a whole bunch of celebrities stated even more egregious and horrendous and despicable statements, and even more questionable, even rhetoric that was even more volatile than anything you heard from President Trump, which by the way, look, he made missteps, but there's a double standard that media is not going to hold accountable. 4 years of hashtag wrong Trump and comedians saying, oh, you got the wrong guy. A lot of things, like, they're not going to hold media accountable. And they're not going to hold Democrats accountable. They're not even going to look at, what's taking place on the streets of this country in terms of $1 to $2 billion in property loss and 19 lives lost. But you have a situation where in the beginning of President Trump's tenure, you knew that his vice president wasn't really on board. You knew that and he knew that as well. And so he should have kept Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn should never have been forced to resign. That was the biggest mistake by President Trump. And when you give a machine or a corrupt system, you give that victory early on, that initial victory, okay? Where, they justified it by saying that Michael Flynn lied to the former vice president about what? Who cares? National Security Advisor doesn't really have to. That was gossip and hearsay anyway. But let's say the National Security Advisor has a different viewpoint than the vice president. So what? Vice president doesn't need to. Just the way they justified things was a deceptive attempt at justifying it. What eventually became a special counsel. They forced Michael Flynn out, and the former vice president was part of that. Okay, maybe not directly part of it, but he could have simply said, "Yeah, I have no problem with this man." Instead, they did not indict Michael Flynn on anything to do with working alongside Russia. That's a fact. He didn't work alongside Russia. He didn't even lobby for another country while he was in government. The judge presiding over his case stated, "Oh, I misspoke." So they only got him on allegedly lying to Peter Strzok and another corrupt bureau official. Okay, these people have text messages where they said, "We'll stop Trump." There's a double standard. But what President Trump should have realized is that what was taking place against him was bigger, more grandiose than he could ever have imagined. The first victory they had was Michael Flynn. He should have stuck by Michael Flynn. That actually is a story that ties into the former vice president. But perhaps not in the way that you think. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. We're back on our way to 200,000 subscribers. Tell your friends about this channel right now. When you think of the former vice president, you're probably thinking, well, he should have stood by Trump in the past couple of months, and a Democrat would have. Yeah, but see, again, we already knew that he had a limit. We already knew that his loyalty to Trump was not the same type of loyalty as Biden to President Obama, or Cheney to Bush, or any vice president to a president. That wasn't. Pence was selected, and he probably should have picked somebody different, but maybe he wouldn't have won with somebody different. Pence was selected as the alter ego of Trump. Look at this docile, calm, serene, stoic, salt of the earth type of individual who is religious and he's the anti-Trump, and look, it's kind of like, it balanced out President Trump's personality, but maybe that's what Trump was thinking. Okay, that perhaps was the same reason. I mean, look at the people President Trump picked around him. Jeff Sessions, the former vice president. I mean, you had people who just eventually were let go and then wrote tell-all books, which were probably all nonsense. Michael Cohen. I mean, all of these people around him were horrendous. He went into the White House with people waiting to politically stab in him in the back. And so I think that, you had certain people say that the former vice president was disloyal and committed a crime or crimes and all this stuff. It's like, that's not accurate, and that's not the story here. The story is that he picked somebody as VP who was always going to think of himself first in terms of political utility. He was never going to go to bat for President Trump, and we knew that we knew that in January of 2017. Now, if you haven't fallen asleep already, I know this is dry and it's not exciting and it's not enticing and it's not, but look at, you judge people by their actions. Will they stick by you, or will they don't have to give you extreme loyalty, but will they act in an honorable manner? And his former VP did not when it came to Michael Flynn. The beginning of Trump's presidency started with a betrayal, and it wasn't a betrayal of President Trump. It was a betrayal of General Michael Flynn, who, by the way, was a veteran that Democrats went after. So they spent years talking about how Trump disparaged McCain, but they didn't care about how they disparaged another veteran in Michael Flynn, or Tulsi Gabbard, or Max Cleland. One of the Lincoln Project people went, engaged in the most shameful, nefarious type of activity against Max Cleland in the early 2000s when he opposed, rightfully so, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld's foreign policy. But you fast forward to CPAC, he doesn't want to show up, not only because of the past couple of months, but he might not have even shown, even if you didn't have what the tragedy that took place in January, which should never have happened. Which, by the way, when you had somebody dress up as the LMNOP message board shaman, whatever he called himself, that message board was the absolute worst thing to ever happen to President Trump. And I told people this 2 years ago. My God almighty. I told people this. Have you ever wondered, ladies and gentlemen, and I know the vast majority, 99% of my viewers don't listen to that nonsense, but have you ever wondered why Democrats don't investigate who started or who wrote all those nonsensical, irrational, absurd, tinfoil hat fantasies on that message board? Why don't they investigate? Why don't they get the FBI? Why don't they have a congressional investigation on who's starting this misinformation? I mean, they spend all this time. Oh my God, the Trumpers are listening to message boards again. Those Trumpers will believe anything. Well, I know it's hurting the country. I know. I agree with you, actually. H.A. Goodman agrees with you. Actually, I was the first one in all of media to say, this is dangerous. This is going to lead to no good. Why don't they have congressional investigations? Why don't they have any type of investigations? Why doesn't the New York Times and Washington Post find out who is behind all of this? Gee, I wonder why. It's either somebody who is a conservative who doesn't care about politics, but maybe leans towards President Trump, who wants to manipulate people, or a group of people who wanted to just manipulate and deceive and create this hoax for their own, benefit somehow, because that's spawned a little tiny industry, a cottage industry, or it's these Democratic operatives to just, they're actually there to just create this unfortunate altered, cyber reality that leads people astray. And you saw that in January. And a lot of those people, unfortunately, believed in message boards. And again, there's just the former vice president not going to CPAC is a very good thing for President Trump. It's actually good. It would be better for the former vice president to go to CPAC. It would actually be better. I mean, I assume that he has presidential ambitions in 2024, which he's not going to. I mean, people like Ben Sasse, Mitt Romney, they're not going to take over the Republican Party. And if they become nominee, Biden would easily defeat any never-Trumper. But you have people like Lindsey Graham, you have people like Mitch McConnell, you have people like the former vice president who were on the fence. Now, how many times did you hear the former vice president say that President Trump never worked with Russia? He could have categorically stated that maybe he did, but nobody remembers. How many times did you hear McConnell or Lindsey Graham? Lindsey Graham you heard here and there. How many times did you hear Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley throughout the past 4 years? I mean, you kind of heard them here and there, not really. Everyone was in it for themselves, and President Trump should have known this. So the people who are upset at a former vice president for not being loyal, you have to, A, understand that everybody in politics is out for themselves. B, acknowledge that President Trump should have known this. He shouldn't have just demanded people act in the same manner that Biden would act with President Obama or Cheney would act with Bush. Those are the old school Republicans, and today's Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party since Tammany Hall, are finely tuned political machines. The loyalty is based on legal graft. They're not loyal to each other because of ideology or because they love one another or because they really care about, a politician. They're loyal because it benefits them. When Eric Swalwell falls in love with a foreign intelligence operative, guess what? If it's a Republican or if it's a Trump supporter, you better believe every salacious detail would be out. Oh my God, they would obsess over it. But you're a Democrat. You're part of the team. You're part of the club. So nobody really investigates. Media just sweeps it under the rug. They don't want to know. They don't care. They don't question. They're not suspicious as to how much national security information possibly was lost. They don't care. People are loyal on the left, or the Democratic Party maintains a lockstep and allegiance because it's a Tammany Hall style political machine that runs on graft or legal graft. And media is a part of it, and you don't have to have a contract that says, if you fall in love with an intelligence operative, you better believe the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, Esquire, Vanity Fair won't engage in any investigative journalism because they won't care. But they would care if it's a Republican. Signed, all the editors. No, that's not the way it works. You're covered, your indiscretions, your sins, your possible criminal behavior, there was no intent. The head of the FBI will say, there was top secret intelligence on Clinton's servers. but there was no intent to hide information. Well, why do you have private servers for 4 years that you don't even tell the president? How do you not intend to hide if President Obama doesn't even know? Apparently, allegedly. Of course he knew. Then you have the fact check and they hide behind absurd notions that people just didn't know. And then they say, well, you can't prove they didn't know. Fact. This is a fact. You can't prove that it wasn't for convenience. The servers for 4 years with top secret intel. Yeah, but it's very likely that she used servers to hide her Clinton Foundation emails. But again, they don't care about all of this stuff. And President Trump should have, he's hopefully will learn from missteps. There were missteps, and a lot of what happened, you can't really blame Trump because, he, I'm sure, expected to be treated a little better, but I'm sure I don't think he realized the vitriol and the venom they would level at him from day one. And then I think that the more they did that, the more that instead of simply saying, whoa, like, what's going on here? Could they be investigating me for nonsense? I mean, I'm sure, he probably thought that all of the uproar over Russia would end when he got elected. But that tinfoil hat fantasy continued. There was no Russian interference. Facebook ads swung nobody's vote. And you notice how the Twitter and Facebook executives, they're not caught up in any investigations. The whole thing was a racket. But like what happened was the former vice president not going to CPAC, it almost is a summary of the past 4 years of Trump's administration. He is victorious enough to pretty much control the Republican Party, but then the people closest to him abandon him or, act in a way that Democrats wouldn't have acted. I guess in this long-winded kind of, what I'm trying to convey is that there are great things that President Trump has accomplished, great foreign policy achievements, great economic achievements. Pandemic was not his fault. He never called it a hoax. He never said, 1930s and 1940s Germans were good people. There was fine people. They never, like all of these things that happened, that took place during his presidency were examples of the fake news that media perpetuated, lies and deceit. But there were ways that he could have overcome and communicated his humanity. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. He needs to actually convey that, hey, he's a human being, and that the people who are lying about him or that the people who are turning against him have their own agenda, their own political interests, and not the interests of the country. And he should convey in that speech that he didn't need politics. He was a billionaire before the presidency. He's a billionaire after the presidency. He actually lost money. He doesn't need politics to survive. Biden and his son and his brother and all those people, Clintons, they need politics to survive. They need politics to make money. Okay, you're right. You generally have a government salary if you're a politician. Well, not Democrats. Speaking engagements, book deals, positive news coverage. If they get into a controversy of scandal, it's swept under the rug. With Trump, very different. You have an obsession. The Southern District for like a day investigating the Clinton Foundation, but they found nothing. I don't know. They should have read Clinton Cash. But with Trump, it's an obsession that they're actually investigating allegations. They're not investigating any criminal act that took place. Generally, when criminal acts take place, like bank fraud, the bank notifies the authorities. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe. And that didn't happen in New York. Give me your thoughts below. Don't direct any negative emotions towards the former vice president. You wouldn't. These politicians are sharks. If somebody throws you overboard and you get devoured by sharks, you're probably not going to have a lot of animosity towards the shark. You're probably going to have more animosity towards the person who pushes you overboard. And that's what's taking place with President Trump and the people around him. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Oh, by the way, be here at about 7 p.m. Pacific tonight for the live stream. It's about 7. I should have told you that earlier on. 7 p.m. Pacific tonight for the live stream.